Hey guys, Stuart here. Today I'm going to be showing you how to upholster the Baltic Birch wall kit from AVC. I'll demonstrate on this small panel, but the methods in the video are applicable to all panels we provide. Now, our first step for wrapping a panel is making sure that we wrap the right side. At AVC, we always mark the right side of the panel with a happy face, just so we know to cover that up. So the next step in our upholstery process will be to glue down the Landau. The Landau is used for an additional measure of insulation and sound dampening, and I have mine laid out here and pre-cut to about the size we'll need. I like to glue down the Landau in a sort of two-half method. So I'll make sure that it does in fact reach both edges, and I'll fold back one half of the Landau before I start my gluing. So we're going to use 74 today to glue down our Landau. It's a good foam-safe glue. So when you're putting down your glue, you want about a 50% overlap with each pass. So when you do your first round of gluing, it's very important to make sure that you have the seam well glued. It's an easy spot to miss, and there's nothing worse than having a void under the very middle of your panel. Now on to the Landau side. Keep in mind while you're doing this is you need to have full coverage, every little space on your panel. So any voids need to be filled up. And now I'm going to go ahead and roll down our fabric. Now we do use high strength contact adhesives for all of these, which means you need to rub your hand over every part of the panel just to make sure you've got that good bond. And now we'll expose the other side and go ahead and repeat that process. Great. Another thing to keep in mind is always check your adhesives for cure time to ensure proper bonding. Now before I move on to the next step, I'll just make sure that I don't have any bubbles underneath the Landau here. All right? So we're going to trim, and the easiest way to do that is actually flip the whole panel, grab your hobby knife. My preferred blade for this project is one with a retractable blade. I just find that it gives me more control in actually trimming the Landau. I find that if I give the Landau some tension away from where I'm cutting, I tend to get the cleanest cut through the actual adhesive. The adhesive does like to grab your knife, so that's another reason that having it on the table and cutting against a table will help you. It will keep you from tearing that Landau through the action of the adhesive. Now if the glue does catch your blade, just go ahead and lift it, start over again. You can usually cut through whatever glue it was stopping you. So we have our Landau trimmed. Let's move on to fabric. Flip the panel, and I have a piece of fabric pre-cut here for us. When you're cutting your fabric for the panel, you want to make sure that you leave at least 2 to 3 inches beyond the edge of the panel because the fabric needs to wrap around the back. So gluing down the fabric is very similar to gluing down the Landau. I actually use exactly the same method. I lay out my fabric and fold it halfway back. I'm using a 90 adhesive for this step. And just like with the 74, our application has a 50% overlap. And repeat the process on the fabric here. Now with the fabric, you can actually spray a little beyond the edge of the panel because again, you'll be wrapping it around the back. Great. And now we're going to carefully smooth out the fabric. Again, trying to avoid any wrinkles and making sure that we rub the entire surface so that we have proper adherence of that contact cement. We'll repeat the process on the other side. When gluing fabric on the second side, I'll always make sure to pull it back beyond the glue point. That way I know that I have full coverage on both surfaces. Another thing to keep in mind is you just want to make sure you don't have any debris on your glue surfaces before applying glue. And you can see here I'm overlapping my previous glue line. Now that our adhesive is properly cured, we're going to go ahead and lay it down. Again, smoothing it all over to make sure that we don't have any air pockets. Okay, so now that we're done on the front side, we're going to move on to the back. The first part of this process will be to trim the excess fabric from around the edges. As I mentioned before, we want to leave 2 to 3 inches to fold back over the edge. Be sure to save any excess fabric you might have for use in the next step. So I've trimmed my fabric. Now we're going to go ahead and apply some glue to the back. Now for this step, it's important to make sure that you get into the corner where the fabric meets the panel so that you get adhesion around the entire panel. Now you also will apply glue to the back of the panel, roughly to the point where your fabric will overlap. Now we're going to let this glue cure and then come back to wrap around the edges. So the next part of the process is anchoring the fabric to the back side of the panel. As we do this, we want to make sure to really stretch the fabric before adhering it to the back, just like stretching a canvas. Stretch and adhere. Now when you start to get within a few inches of the corner, we're going to stop stretching. We're going to grab this corner and we're going to pull it in. So this is what your corner looks like as you start the corner method. Now you'll grab the triangle here, pull it tight, and adhere your fabric down. You should have one little shark fin sticking up. So again, we're going to pull this corner in, adhere that fabric down, smush it together there, and we should have 2 little shark fins sticking up from our corner. So again, I am stretching, making sure to give the fabric a good stretch before I actually glue it down to the back. I just want to make sure that I have really nice, clean, tight edges. Anywhere that you encounter an outside curve or corner, you're going to end up with some slack. So again, just like I did before, I'm going to make a little shark fin to take up that slack and glue that fabric together. And we'll trim these off later. For the next part of my panel, I'm actually approaching an inside curve, and the method for an inside curve is a little bit different. So for an inside curve, we're going to actually make a couple of relief cuts to let that fabric stretch around. And when we actually pull it down to glue, you'll see what I mean there. So I like to start on one edge of the curve and make sure I have that pulled all the way back. Then I'll do each of these little fingers as their own piece to really make sure I hug this curve. Now I have a little outside curve here, so again you'll see I'll end up with this excess shark fin here, which we'll cut off. And for my last corner, we will pull it in, make our 2 shark fins, fold them down, and our panel is wrapped. Now for our final step, we're going to go ahead and trim the panel. The way that I do that is just get the scissors down as close to the back of the panel as I can while I put some tension on our shark fins and pull them off. And if you did everything right, you should end up with a very clean seam there. I'll just repeat this step on each of these corners here. We're trying to get it as flat as possible so that it sits really nicely against the wall. And with that, our panel is upholstered and ready to install. If you like this video, please hit the like button, and if you're not subscribed, be sure to subscribe. See you in the next video.